Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Well, hello, Nadia. I'm just going to present you briefly. I mean, Nadia, you're a documentary maker and also a film producer. You've done so many things. You are also the co-founder of a festival of an international festival of urban films, the co-founder of the streaming platform for Ukrainian films that's called Tak Flix. And you've also founded a company for documentary film sales. You've traveled a lot. You've studied in Budapest and in Warsaw, and you've been a Fulbright Fellow in Philadelphia, which probably explains why you speak such good English. Now, your first feature film was Heat Singers, but before that you made several shorts, including one called Exarch, about a progressive Orthodox priest who sort of breaks away from the hierarchy, and a recent one which I saw called Women Who Play, about 7 young women who are big figures in the Ukrainian art scene, who talk about game playing, basically, go back to childhood, but also apply it to what they do today. To come back to Heat Singers, which is a wonderful documentary, it's set in Ivano-Frankivsk.
Very good, very good.
Which is where you were born. And it's very much a family affair. It's set in the heating works of this town, and which is a big central heating system. If I can visualize it, it's a big building somewhere in the center of the city, or a little bit outside.
It's rather in the outskirts, and it's a couple of different buildings because it's the whole city heat supply system. So they have a boiler station in one place, the office in a different place, and smaller heat stations across the whole city.
Okay, and the reason why I say it's a family affair, it's because your grandfather was one of the engineers who designed it. And your mother...
He was the founder. He actually designed the whole heat supply system for the city in the 1960s.
Which is amazing. And your mother works there, and she's in the film. Not a big role, you say, but we can see her. You yourself, well, I'll ask you, the first question would be, why did you decide to make this particular film, your film, as your first feature?
Indeed, it is a family affair, and as a beginner, as a debut, you want to start with something that you know, but also it's a very personal film and a self-exploration. I'm not in the film, and my grandparents passed away many years ago. They are not in the film, and even my mom is, she's there like a few times in a small scenes, but she's not the lead protagonist. But to me, this is the exploration of myself and my heritage. And the longest story is that now I live in Kyiv, which is the capital city of Ukraine. And I live in an area where I'm surrounded by people like myself who are doing film, arts, music, some NGOs, some people who are engaged and I would say kind of privileged, who live in a very special circle, but my family is all engineers and workers, high-ranking workers, but people of a very, very different background, nothing to do with arts. And so now when I'm in Kyiv, I find myself in this weird situation that everybody comes from some artistic family, but I don't. So at first I ignored it. And I pretended this was not me, but later on, I think I matured and I started to appreciate it. And I was just curious to explore this culture or subculture.
Because it took you quite a long time to make the film, didn't it? It was a 3-year project.
In terms of documentary, it's not too long. You know, sometimes people make documentary films for 5 years or longer. But for me personally, it was the longest project I ever did. And when I started, I didn't expect it will take so long.
And one of the themes, so you have the winter's coming or autumn's coming, and all the sort of heating works are sort of rumbling into life again. And so you have the employees going to fix terrible leaks in these horribly run down buildings. And you also then have the union man who organizes sort of choral practice, because the people at the heating works happen to be a really good choir. But you hated, I also thought this is a generational film, because you know, you're young and funky and you live in Kiev, and you hated the music they sang at the beginning. And if I understand correctly, you wanted them to sing completely different music, but they refused. Could you tell us?
It was a complicated story in the beginning, truly so. I didn't particularly like this kind of music, and it's very special. I don't know if it reads in Belgium, and it's like a cultural studies case, but this is a very strange pseudo-folk music. It's not authentic folk music, because in the Soviet times, Ukrainian authentic culture was appropriated by Soviets, and it was staged in this very weird totalitarian practice of choir singing. In a choir, everybody has to be the same. It kind of oppresses the charisma and the personality of the singer, because you have to obey and there have to be many people. It's totalitarian, authoritarian. It is a very special repertoire, whereas traditional singing, it's always smaller ensembles, 3, 5, maybe 7 people. And it's a polyphony where each voice, each party expresses themselves, and people are never forced to sing together. I do a little bit of traditional singing. So there are these people whom you can sing along with, and there are people whom you cannot. It's like a relationship. Whereas in a choir, it's somewhat pushed, and it's like a whole different culture. So in the case of my choir in the film, it's a little bit of a mix of both, but the singers, the workers themselves, they like the authentic music, but their leaders and the conductors, who are not from the heat supply plant, they are just people who are invited to practice with them. They insisted in some kinds of repertoire. So we had a little bit of a conflict. In the end, I just dismissed my plan and I embraced whatever was there, because it's a documentary, and it is, you can't control much in a documentary. You have to obey the reality.
And in fact, what you said is very interesting, but they are very good at the harmonies. But maybe there's none of this sort of, you know, solo, and this voice takes center stage for a while, but the harmonies are beautiful. But I was going to also ask you, how much of it is actually staged? I mean, did they really win the first prize for the choirs and so on? How much did you make them act?
Just one little moment, and I'm back. So I would say none of it is staged. It's a true documentary. So all of the events that happened did actually happen. They did win a competition, but it's a really funny competition. It's you know, as someone in Kyiv, you don't even know this competition exists. It's a very special, again, in this subculture of people who do choir singing in the union choirs, it's probably known. And it's also cool, you know, if you are an engineer or a hotline service dispatcher, you travel somewhere to perform. It's a big event, but it's because these people are very humble and they have a very modest lifestyle. So they did win. They are great. They are amazing. Some of them are really good singers. And but overall, helicopter view wise, it's a very provincial, small thing. And the only thing that we did, it wasn't staged, but some things we asked to have repeated because we were not on time. I mean, if Ivan Vasilovich, so for instance, there is this very nice scene with the card game on his really cool vintage computer that we adore. We just love this scene and how he does this. I saw him play that once, and I didn't manage to catch it. So I asked him to play the game again. In a way, it is staged, but it is also not staged because he actually does this. As well as some, I don't know, some like air scenes when somebody's smoking or so.
And apart from the autobiographical aspect of it, what was it telling us about Ukraine then, at the time?
And I think it is very much true now. To me, this film is, I'm a little bit of a left-wing person, which is very rare and strange in Ukraine, because we don't even have the conventional division in our politics for the right, the center, and the left. It doesn't apply in our political context, but the idea of social equity and social justice has been discredited by the Soviet Union. So to say you are left in Ukraine is a very tricky and risky thing. It's like, oh, these bourgeois people from the West who never experienced true socialism or communism, they say that. But we know it because the Soviet Union was the discreditation of the idea of socialism, and people are somewhat allergic to it. And that means a lot of times that some neoliberal policies are like very vital here. And I don't like this. For instance, I do like a lot the idea of trade unions and safety at work and some justice at work. And I don't like that these things are not being discussed. And these things are like grandma's talks.
Yeah.
This like in my generation, nobody talks about it. People complain about the difficult work conditions and injustice at their workplaces, but they don't think about the solutions. And unionizing, protecting the labor rights is actually an amazing solution. And it's complicated with the unions, truly so. And some of them are like marionettes. They are not real independent unions, but I really like Ivan Vasilyevich, and he really believes in the idea of union. And to me, it's about this one point. And point two, it's about the communal enterprise workers. It's these heroes, people, especially now when Ukraine is at war. It's tremendous, the scale of everyday heroism these people are doing. So whenever there is the shelling, and yesterday it was an Independence Day, the national holiday, which has a very special meaning in Ukraine now. It was also the 6 months sharp from the start of the full-scale invasion. And Ukraine was shelled again. There were some shellings not so far from Kyiv. So when the shelling happens, the building is, I mean, of course, people's lives are taken, and this is horrible. But then there are also these destructions and buildings and streets. And then immediately communal workers come and they clean everything and they make a normal life for us. And nobody, I mean, very few people appreciate that. We have this big now tendency of appreciation of our people in the army because, you know, filmmakers, artists, musicians, doctors, teachers are in the army, and many Ukrainians joined the armed forces of Ukraine to become defenders, to defend their land. But also these communal workers, they are doing amazing everyday heroism. And this is my way to say thank you. And I really, really appreciate that invisible labor, but also to draw attention to this invisible labor that's essential for normal life. And in one of the scenes, if you remember, there is this very angry woman. She's furious because her radiators are cold, and she's just yelling at a poor dispatcher who's in Zen, who is so calm, so laid back.
She needs to vent her frustration or something like that, she says.
Yeah.
But what's happened to the heating works now? I mean, are the people all continuing and working there? Or?
It's actually quite sad. The plant was half privatized and it's no longer fully state run, and it wasn't very transparent. So people of the retirement age retired, like my mom. It didn't happen nicely, unfortunately, and we were helping a little bit to protect people's rights with some legal assistance so that they get the reimbursements. The choir ceased to exist. On the one hand, it's kind of natural because people who were in the choir, most of them were retirement age, so it was just not enough. It's a very generational thing, but also because the new management is not really interested in supporting this, and most of all because Ivan Vasilyevich retired, the trade union leader. He was the one who was pushing this and who was taking care of this, and the new trade union leader was cool, but he wasn't a singer himself. He wasn't in a choir, and it was harder for him to push for this. So the choir, unfortunately, does not exist anymore. And personally, my mom, she now works in the kindergarten or a primary school. She's the safety engineer. She teaches kids and teachers to go to the bomb shelter. She taught, because now these youngsters, I don't think they go to school now. And she had to find herself a new choir. So I think she's now in the church choir because she misses it a lot, because it's therapy. It's a very nice routine and practice that people miss.
Yes, I'm sure. So what's happening to you right now? I mean, you're making films. It seems to me like crazy.
It is kind of crazy. I'm in Kyiv, in the capital of Ukraine, and I'm happy to be here. I really appreciate every day that I'm here, that I can see my friends, see my family, and live. I live a new normal life. It's normal in a way that it's relatively safe. Sometimes Kyiv is also getting shelled, but it really depends on the area of the city. But then if you keep safety instructions, or if you're lucky, it's they say that the chances that you die from a shelling in Kyiv are lower than from a car accident. So it's like relatively safe. But life is new, life is different. We have a lot of air raid alerts, and Russia is still like trying to attack Ukraine, to attack civilian population and civilian buildings. We have a very special pace of life. We have the curfew, and it structures everyday life in a very special way.
Every day, what time?
Curfew means that from 11 to 5 o'clock, you're not allowed to be in the street. But it also means that a lot of establishments close at 6, 7, or 8 because of commute, public transportation. Basically, you have to jump on the last bus or metro by 9:30 p.m., which is quite early because Kyiv is a big and busy city. And it was, I wouldn't say it's like New York City, but the tendency was towards that. Like there were always things that worked at night, and it's a very Kyiv thing to have a work meeting at 9 p.m. because we are busy and because we have to commute. So it's a busy and a very lively city, and it feels very cut off. So some parts of life are cut off, the way logistics and communications work. There are a lot of things that are restricted, that you need permits for. So life changed a lot. Supply chains changed. So this is the life in the city. Many people left, many people came back, many people are in the army or are preparing to go to the army. Many people from the film industry are operating drones and are studying drone operation.
You're making a film about one of these people, a woman, or you made a film.
So now, coming back to myself, I run Tak Flix, the Ukrainian online cinema, and because many cinemas do not work, or it's a very special way they work, whenever there is an air raid alert, the siren, and yesterday it was, I don't know, I mean, the whole day was air raid alerts, they have to put people to the shelter. They're not allowed to do any public meetings, public activities are considered dangerous because, it's a gathering of the people and it's a potential target for the Russians because that's what they do. They just target civilians. So it's really difficult for the cinemas, but people still need film, because people need their therapy and catharsis, and people need Ukrainian film now more than ever. And we have a lot of work therefore as an online cinema, and we have more people watching both in Ukraine and abroad. Many people are interested, many foreign people want to understand what Ukraine is, what our history is, what our culture is, and we are doing a lot of that. And also as a filmmaker, I had a dream to make this one film for 5 years. And it was like a crazy, crazy project, but now it suddenly came together. I have a little bit of funding. It's not enough, and we are really compromising. But I also feel like we have this fatalistic worldview now in Ukraine. We feel like tomorrow we might die, or tomorrow might not happen, or tomorrow there might be no cinema anymore. You might need to become another Ukrainian migrant in Europe. So I want to do this film now. And if I have a single opportunity, I need to use it. And I'm preparing for this crazy shoot. It's a single shot film.
This is the film about the woman who's an expert in drones, or it's another one?
No. That one is no longer relevant. Like,
okay.
You know, you always have 10 films in development and one that you're actually making. Now, this one, it's a film about the capital city of a country where the war is happening, but life continues and life blooms at the same time, that these two things happen. And it's shot in a very special way technically, and it's a very intricate
one shot. One shot.
It's one shot, okay. Single shot. It's a fiction film. It's not a documentary. It's a fiction short film.
Well, that sounds super exciting, and that's the one you're beginning now, sort of as soon as possible.
And we depend on a lot of permits, the curfew, the military administration, the city council, the weather, people's schedules. It's also very difficult because many people left and there are fewer people at the spot. And when you need to match everybody's schedule, you just get crazy. So we're just constantly changing everything.
Do you think it's, I mean, paradoxically, that this war is a very creative period for Ukrainian artists, young Ukrainian artists like yourself? The urgency, as you said, or the sort of tension?
Unfortunately, I wouldn't say so, because the question of very basic security is still vital. And, you know, when you miss basic safety, you can't think about art. Being able to be an artist is a huge privilege, which many people are devoid of. It is my personal situation that I'm privileged and I live in a relative safety, and I have an opportunity to make films, to make a film. But many people, they are on a survival level. They need to take care of their kids, family. They needed to evacuate. Many people lost their homes because many of them lived around Kyiv in the suburbs, and it was occupied and heavily damaged. Many people died. Many people lost their loved ones. So it's like not a really productive ground for arts. But I would say the ones who have an opportunity to do something are urged. And it's a time when you have less doubts and when you want to use your creative voice to support Ukraine in all possible ways. And whoever has the opportunity does so.
Nadia, I wanted to ask you for your position on the banning of Russian films. And I will say, people also like Sergei Loznitska, how do you pronounce his name? Who's one of the biggest named documentary filmmakers of Ukraine, who has been excluded from the Ukrainian Film Academy. And do you think, I mean, and who felt that this was the wrong direction to go, that there were a lot of very good Russian filmmakers who were very critical of Putin, and that this was not fair? What's your view on this issue?
Honestly, I do not know very many Russian filmmakers who thought this was not fair, and I do support the ban.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate Loznitsa as an artist. He's an amazing director and an artist, but I am strongly opposed to his political views and to the way he, I would go as far as to say that he's a traitor to Ukraine, because he received funding for his films from Ukraine and he has been honored and treated with a lot of respect in Ukraine. And his statements and his political views are manipulative. To me, he just manipulates a lot of facts and his position to provoke some epatage and to defend himself. And so coming back to the ban of, again, if you name me some Russian filmmaker who stood up and said, look, actually, it wasn't cool that we took the governmental money and made this film that praised the Russian army or the Russian president. And I'm sorry for that. And dear Ukrainian people, I think we actually should have made a film about the war that started in 2014. I mean, now we have a full-scale invasion, but this war is happening since 2014. And I don't know Russian filmmakers who made a film about this war, who made the films about the war in Georgia. And Russia has been acting as an imperial country, and Russian cultural sphere has benefited from that greatly, and they exercise the privileges. And so, like, please name me these oppositionary ones. I don't know them. I maybe know Vitaly Mansky. He fled Russia in 2014, and he's born in Ukraine. So he lived in Moscow. I know this one guy, but no, I don't know these names. I wish I was mistaken, but I made my research. And all I hear is that the Russians continue to behave as imperialists. They want to protect themselves and to silence Ukrainian voices. Again, I mean, I think it's a nice thing to do, to just give voice to Ukrainian people and Ukrainian artists and support Ukraine. And as an oppositionary Russian, this is what I would do. And I don't see this happen. Coming back to the overall concept of banning Russian films and Russian culture, it has to be explained that this is not the aim in itself, but we are talking about a situation when civilian people are targeted in Ukraine every day. Like yesterday, the railroad was targeted by Russians with civilian people dying. And I think in this situation, it is impossible to continue playing Russian ballet and Tchaikovsky. And we need a revision of Russian culture, a radical revision. I believe there are amazing things in Russian cultural history, and there were dissidents and some people who fought Russian imperialism. But if I were to revise it, I would want to hear the Siberian people, the Komi people, all these multiple ethnicities from Russia who were oppressed. And I don't really see that, and I don't want to ban the whole Russian culture, but I think it definitely needs its revision, and I think it has imperial roots. It enforces power relations, and Russia did it so smartly. I think they really tricked the West, who is very much in love with Dostoevsky. And I find it, if anybody is watching this among progressive people in Belgium, still, can you imagine this? I sometimes give interviews and I sometimes talk to people, and when I'm in Ukraine, when my country is shelled, when people are dying, people approach me and tell me that they love Dostoevsky and they really want to talk about this to me now. I find this a little bit horrible, and I think we really need to rethink it. And by the way, it's an interesting thing. You see what's happening? I'm in front of my window, and this is my anti-shelling.
Very interesting. It's a huge bit.
Yeah, and it just suddenly
has appeared.
As
yes.
I'm talking about Russian culture. So
yeah,
please, when Russians leave Ukraine in peace, we can continue this conversation. But now the question is, like, Ukrainian artists are in the army, some of them already dead, many of them dead since 2014, and
yes.
Russians are advocating for don't touch us. Like, I find this a little bit ridiculous.
Yes, and I mean, to a certain degree, what's happening now has been, I don't want to use the word propaganda, but I mean, it's been very good for Ukraine because people want to see Ukrainian films. I'm talking about in the rest of the world. People want to hear Ukrainian music, and the people are becoming a lot more sort of aware of the whole culture that comes out of your country. And I suppose a number of Ukrainians too are sort of with the Kino 42 cinema in Kyiv, with Tak Flix, they're also becoming more interested in the culture. We're running out of time, but this is the time we have, so that's fine. But don't you think it's also an education of the rest of the world and of Ukrainians right now that is taking place about Ukrainian identity?
It is taking place, and I'm happy it's taking place. I'm just regretting that it's a little bit too late, and I'm regretting the price we as Ukrainians had to pay for this. And I wish we didn't have to lose this many people, you know.
Yes.
just for the world to learn about our amazing culture and history. So it's good that it's happening, but yeah, I just want Russians to leave my country in peace, and then we can continue making films and curate programs and do our job. We'll do the rest, but yeah, we want the world to help us establish Ukraine's sovereignty as it was since 1991, and it's a very basic, simple thing.
Absolutely. Well, Nadia, thank you very much.